So our question stem here denotes a method of reasoning because we're discussing how the author is proceeding. So when we do these, first thing we always want to do, want to highlight our main conclusion. For me, I tend to go with refuting statements, as more often than not, everything else is going to support that. So when we look at this, newspaper industry habitually cites the rising cost of newspaper to explain, but when corrected for inflation, the cost of newspaper is no more than it was 10 years ago. Um, and then everything else goes towards supporting this and explaining this. So as you may have noticed from the way I described all this, it's going to be causation because we're explaining this. Now this over here is our method of reasoning checklist we have. So main conclusion, everything here is causation. Excellent. Our strength of language, I'm going to say pretty strong because we're saying no more than it was 10 years ago, far from being high cost. Newspapers have been benefiting from cheap newsprint for decades. So the main reason I'm saying fairly strong is we don't have anything indicating, moderate or weak. So when we don't have anything like that, and we are beginning to have definitive statements saying one thing or the other, I lean more towards strong. In fact, I'd say there's a slight argument that our main conclusion has a bit of comparison in it, which is innately strong if you want to look at it that way. So we would go with strong. Now, for our third step, we want to see if there's any flaws. Now, immediately, there's none that are jumping out to me. So I would blank out our third step here, because primarily we utilize that when we come across flawed method of reasoning, and we're not always going to come across those. So we want to utilize that third step as if it has it, we include it. If it doesn't have it, we're not going to worry about it, especially when we're on time constraint. So moving on from here, we're going to want to discuss how our argument proceeds, essentially, or paraphrase. So we introduce claim to refute with our main conclusion, and then we're supporting / explaining it in its entirety. Okay, from here, let's look at our lists. Reinterpreting a popular analogy. So an analogy is innately a comparison. We don't have anything like that, so we wouldn't utilize that. We throw out A. As we look at B, using economic data to raise doubts about the current effectiveness of a historically accepted approach. Maybe, but we're not necessarily utilizing economic data. We're going on and discussing, the effects of newspapers benefiting from cheap newsprint, so on and so forth. But economic data implies to me like stocks went up by 34%, blah, blah, blah. So for that reason, I wouldn't necessarily like B. As we look at C, criticizing a newly developed method by demonstrating that a conventional method shows better results. So we don't really discuss new or old methods per se. We discuss something that may, habitually happen, and then when corrected for current times, but we're not really talking about a new versus old theory. So for that reason, I wouldn't like it. When we have D, challenging an explanation that's been given for a phenomenon in order to induce a different explanation. I do like that because our main conclusion is inherently refuting. So we like this immediately. And as we know, everything here is causation. So that goes along with our explanatory. So we'll stick with that one for now because we're going to look at E, calling into question a justification for a practice by showing how the same justification can be used to support a clearly undesirable practice. So I wouldn't like E because we're not comparing a justified practice versus an unjustified practice or anything like that. We are simply challenging an explanation. So for those reasons, I would cross off E and I would choose D. Let's do show answer. Excellent.